Welcome back. Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube has requested an urgent meeting with Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. That's ahead of the medium-term budget policy statement in an effort to protect teacher posts in the education sector that's facing a budget crisis. Education experts say drastic changes need to happen to save teachers' jobs and to deliver quality education.
Education spend, and again it varies across provinces, but we're spending 76% on average of the total spend on personnel. That means teachers and office-based. Now, I think that there may be room for discussion on efficiencies in both. At the moment, many provinces are just freezing office-based posts, which may be a false economy. I think freezing means that you don't fill necessary posts, but there needs to be a critical review of priorities within the administration and to focus on filling those posts which have the most impact on supporting teachers, on improving teaching and learning. Within the way that we use the available teachers, we have been expanding subject choice post grade 9 to the extent that we have many classes that are fairly small because they're not subjects taken by many. Whereas in the primary schools and in foundation phase in particular, the greatest burden is carried in terms of large class sizes. And again, that's a false economy because we're not building the basics for quality education. So the way the law is written, once the budget is set, the individual MECs need to consult with teacher unions, teacher representatives, in terms of the distribution of posts. And I think that the unions can play a very constructive role there in assisting to focus on priorities and making sure that the distribution of resources best supports improved teaching and learning.
When you consider what all has to be paid for out of that 23,000 that's dedicated to a child, and included in that are the core things, ensuring that the curriculum is delivered, and that goes to teachers and that goes to assistant staff, etc. But it also goes to infrastructure and all the other things that are not seen as core, but with which the department cannot cope without. And some of these things are not actually owned to the Department of Education. They should be provided by other departments. However, given efficiencies as they are, it is easier to provide them within the department. We've started this discussion about what is core and what is not core. And quite honestly, when you look at, take the feeding scheme, which is not a core, but it's an essential. We wouldn't like to see feeding schemes and the like cut. So when you start whittling it down, actually the amount becomes far less. Are we getting bang for our buck? I believe that it's an improving and target. I don't believe we at the best, but I think we are getting there. But the opposite, when you start cutting, then all those gains start whittling away again. And then how do you crawl all the way back again to where you've been?
The Justice Coalition has expressed deep concerns over reports of impending budget cuts in the basic education sector. Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube says the education sector was facing a financial crisis and under immense pressure. She said 7 provinces will not be able to cover their annual expenses in the next 4 years unless measures are put in place to mitigate the crisis. The education sector has a shortfall of 118 billion rand to meet its needs over the next 3 years.
Seen provinces coming out and saying we won't be able to fill some teacher vacancies. Some provinces saying they are under tremendous amount of pressure. And so it was on the back of that I decided to do a full-scale analysis of what the provincial budgets look like and where the budget pressures are. And this was important because it hasn't been quite done in this way, where we are looking at the entire sector and where the problems lie. And it has been a very eye-opening process that the Department department and I undertook, because we were able then to analyze where each province is, and we were able to make projections of if this current trajectory of allocation of budget continues for the next 3 years, where will we end up in terms of the budget shortfall? So we would be looking at something between 7.9 billion to about 118 billion in 3 years of a shortfall should we continue in this trajectory. And so the point that I sought to make is to say to South Africans, there are a number of things that I want to give assurances about, because there are some things that are, being misrepresented. Number one, that South Africans must be assured that it is my single obsession to try and protect as many teachers as possible. And that when provinces are talking about reducing their basket of posts, they are not saying that they're going to be retrenching teachers, but they are saying they may be forced to not fill vacancies. And that in itself, Leanne, has a massive implication, because I don't want educators sitting with large classrooms, because we know that that is going to impact on the outcome of our education sector. I'm seeking a meeting with the Minister of Finance, who's been, I must say, incredibly supportive and understanding of what it is that, and acutely aware of some of the problems that we are facing. And so we are looking to have that meeting with the provincial treasuries and the provincial departments of education, so that we can find one another, and for the sector to be able to say, Treasury, this is what we will do on our side to cut wasteful expenditure, to make sure that no budgets are sent back to Treasury for underspending. These are the undertakings we are making as a sector, but we do require some short-term relief to be able to meet our obligations. And then on a longer term, Leanne, we have to have a conversation as the 7th administration government to ask ourselves, what are our priorities? And to align budgets to those priorities. In my view, things like education, healthcare, police, basic services, those things are critical. And so we've got to align our national budgets to those priorities. And that for me is the only long-term solution I can see. Where else do you find 118 billion in the next 3 years when your economy hasn't grown in more than 1% in a decade? So we've got to grow the economy aggressively, but at the same time, we also have to prioritize. And it's not going to be an easy conversation. It's going to be tough, but it's one that needs to be had.